This is VOA Africa. Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory in for Hashtag of the Year. It's Monday, August 26th. This is Africa 54. The commemoration of the 400th anniversary of slavery in America brings calls for reflection and unity. Nigerian human trafficking victims rebuild their lives after returning to their homeland. And Kenya's first albino football team scores a win. Africans and African Americans participating in events marking 400 years since the start of slavery in the United States say everyone must work harder to unite societies divided along racial and economic lines. VOA reporter Kenneth Bwire reports from Norfolk, Virginia, where people gathered Saturday to observe the anniversary of the beginning of more than 2 centuries of slavery in English-speaking America.
Near the spot where historians say 20 captives from Angola were sold into slavery 400 years ago, celebrations of remembrance and reflection were held by those working to keep this history alive for future generations. Bobby Joe Willis, who attended Saturday's events, says the best way to respect the past is to make a better future by bringing together people from different backgrounds and races.
We can begin to build and see how people can work together as people. This country was built together as a community of people that work together, black and white. But to get back to that, where neighbors helping neighbors, is how all this was able to come about.
Another attendee, Michael Smith, says learning more about slave history makes him even more concerned about divisions in society, where he says gun violence and increased intolerance demand that leaders work toward greater respect for human dignity, not just respect for the rule of law.
From the 60s, when they made amendments to constitutions and laws and so forth, it was Band-Aids. It wasn't actual progress. It was kind of an illusion to mask and you know, get the media, the initial people, to believe that we made progress. So right now I feel like that Band-Aid has been ripped off and people are actually seeing what actually exists and what hasn't changed.
Cameroon traditional chief Njang John came to the ceremonies from a part of his country that is experiencing conflict between government forces and members of the English-speaking minority. He says marking the history of slavery is a chance for stronger bonds between Africa and the United States, but only if leaders celebrate with honesty.
The black Americans who were brought here through slavery should now find their roots back in Africa so that we come to be together. No matter wherever you are an African. If you are black, let's form a greater race and become strong to fight the global economy that is growing up now.
The 1619 anniversary is also being remembered in many African countries where the focus has been on unity and reconciliation. Kenneth Bwire, VOA News, Norfolk, Virginia.
Sudan's newly created Sovereign Council formally declared a state of emergency in the city of Port Sudan on Sunday. The action follows tribal clashes that police say have killed at least 16 people. The acting governor and the head of the National Security Service for the Eastern Red Sea state, of which Port Sudan is the capital, were both dismissed, according to Al-Tahir Abu Hajja, a spokesman for the Sovereign Council. This comes at a delicate time for Sudan following the signing of a power-sharing agreement earlier this month. The Joint Military-Civilian Sovereign Council was sworn in last week, as was Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok, who is set to form a government later this week. Now, clashes between members of the Beni, Amer and Nuba tribes, which have flared up in the past, were reignited on Wednesday and continued into Saturday morning. Well, Nigeria's Agency for Combating Human Trafficking is repatriating and resettling women who have been subjected to forced labor and prostitution after being smuggled into Europe on false promises of working at well-paying jobs. Timothy Obiezu takes a closer look at the story of some human trafficking victims who are now back in Nigeria rebuilding their lives.
It was an offer Beatrice couldn't resist, a job the traffickers told her in 2013 on a big Italian farm. She took the bait, thinking she could help pull her father and mother out of poverty by working abroad. Instead, after being smuggled into Italy, she was forced into prostitution to earn money for her traffickers.
So a friend of mine, when he introduced me, said, look at this place, you are going to work there in the farm. He did not tell me I'm going to do a prostitution. So at the end of the day, we passed through land, through Libya. So travel, we took a ship. A lot of people died.
Beatrice was there for 4 years. More than 11,000 trafficked women from Nigeria are estimated to be working as sex slaves in Italy alone.
Bring anything. It will pack a lot of people. They will build you up, do different things. They will give you fresh pepper. You know how it is if it got to your eyes. Told you to put it in your vagina. How is this? Even if you are in your menses, you can still go outside and walk.
Nigerian men are also victims of human trafficking and forced labor. Chukwuemeka Asiebu spent 6 years in Libya and narrowly escaped alive. He returned to Nigeria and started an advocacy group for the rights of trafficked victims.
As a human trafficker, you are meeting needs, your own needs. Is it detrimental to others? And actually, we found that human trafficking is quite detrimental. It's an epidemic. It's a disaster because you are meeting needs on the expense of life of others.
Nigeria's anti-human trafficking agency, NAPTIP, was set up in 2003 to address the problem. Over the years, it has made some progress repatriating and resettling victims back home, says Arinze Orakwe, a director at NAPTIP.
It's a crime that brought so much shame to Nigeria, and it's a crime that we're not proud to the record and the status of Nigeria, for which government felt is important and critical that we have to do something about it.
With the help of NAPTIP, Beatrice is starting a new life after being trained in catering services. Now she's running her own business. Timothy Obiezu for VOA News, Abuja.
The massive influx of migrants to Greece has given rise to more conflicts at refugee camps. The nation's alternate Minister for Citizens Protection says that Europe's migration problem is beyond Greece's capabilities to handle all by itself. An Afghan teenager attacked 3 Afghan refugees with a knife on Saturday, killing 1 and injuring 2 in a Lesbos camp. The latest national statistics show the total number of refugees stranded in the islands of Lesbos, Samos, Chios, Ios, Lesbos, Leros and Kos is about nearly 23,000. The refugee camps on these islands are all over capacity. Samos, for example, has more than 4,000 refugees living in a camp with a capacity of only 650 people. The increase of refugees has led to rising conflict. Military officers from 18 African nations spent the past year in Pennsylvania studying at the U.S. Army War College. VOA's Azuma Compaore visited with some of them about their experience and has now a report.
African officers are part of the Army War College International Fellows Program meant to improve interoperability and build long-term relationships with senior military officials and civilian leaders around the world. Nigerian Colonel Haruna Ibrahim says the opportunity to move from tactical leadership to strategic leadership better prepares program participants for future duties.
At strategic level, you're reasoning on how to participate with civilians, other services across board, and how you can now relate towards strategy formulation, viewing economics, diplomatic, defense, and military as they intertwine to give you the basics of what a state deserves to project its national power or its relationship with other countries.
Tanzanian Colonel Hoja Ngueshemi is the first African woman in the War College program. She says it is an honor that she hopes will inspire African girls.
Being the first one from the continent of Africa and from my own country, I feel like I'm going to make a history. So I'm very excited about it. Girls in Tanzania, they're going to be motivated. They're going to be inspired because now they can believe that even our mothers, even our sisters can do whatever a man can do.
The military academy has a part.
Burkina Faso selected Lieutenant Colonel Yves Didier Bamouni says the program exposes international officers to many different approaches to leadership.
We had a really friendly environment that allowed us to be able to argue in a healthy environment, to be able to contradict each other, because the learning here is mostly the exchange of experiences. I think that in our seminar we have been able to see and exchange experiences that are not necessarily the same, that are often contradictory but in compliance with prevailing standards.
Hi, Bill. Good day.
Military history and strategy professor Bill Johnson says Lieutenant Colonel Bamouni brought a standard of excellence to the program.
One of the things that I found most interesting and intriguing about Lieutenant Colonel Bamouni's participation in the seminar is his critical thinking abilities and his ability to come at problems and issues from a slightly different perspective. Those perspectives and an ability to politely question assumptions causes the seminar to think more deeply about issues, and I think contributed to a great deal of learning within the seminar.
U.S. officials say they hope these international fellows return home as critical, innovative thinkers with the wisdom and strength to use their military leadership to promote conflict resolution. Arzuma Compaore, VOA News, at the U.S. Army War College in Carlisle, Pennsylvania.
Wildfires are raging in Brazil's Amazon rainforest. Environment organizations and researchers say business interests emboldened by the country's new president are to blame. The government has authorized military intervention. VOA's Amrasha Robasadi has more.
Saturday in Brazil, troops in the Amazon fight for the future of the blazing rainforest. Planes dropped much-needed water on a region with 6 states now asking for military help. Wildfires continue burning large areas of the Amazon at record pace. Flames choke the life out of trees, animals, and the air over much of South America, captured in these images from NASA satellites.
These kinds of things happen here every year. We just aren't able to tell who is responsible, but it's the same thing every year, and nobody is punished.
Environmental groups and researchers say loggers and cattle ranchers likely started the fires to clear and use the land for business. Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro has his own theory as to who bears the blame.
In my understanding, there's a strong suspicion that it could be the people from the NGOs because they lost funding from the federal government.
Bolsonaro, despite deploying the military, insists that the fires are no worse than other years. Not so, says Brazil's space agency. Researchers registered nearly 73,000 fires so far in 2019, an 80% jump from last year. More than half of those fires are in the Amazon region. Some world leaders shared their concerns on Twitter, and French President Emmanuel Macron, who was attending the G7 meeting in France, pledged his country's support in the firefight.
The Amazon is our common good. We are all concerned. First, we need to help Brazil put down these fires, and then we need to invest in reforestation and allow local inhabitants and NGO workers develop activities that will preserve this forest that we all need, because it is a treasure of our biodiversity and our climate.
The Amazon rainforest provides 20% of the world's oxygen while absorbing much of our carbon dioxide. Academics and environmental groups warn that losing the forest likely means losing the battle against climate change. Arash Arabasadi, VOA News, Washington.
And we'll be right back.
Shekhar Sali, host and senior editor of VOA's international call-in talk show, Straight Talk Africa.
Today we'll examine the tobacco industry.
We pretty much touch on anything that you can think of. Politics, health issues, human rights issues, you name it, we talk about it. The issues that we discuss are pertinent to most people on the African continent. A very, very rare and unique opportunity to interact with their leaders.
The lyrics could be French,
English,
Portuguese,
Bantu,
Arabic.
It is the beat.
The African beat that counts.
The beat does all the translations.
It cuts across all languages and gives us the understanding that this is the African beat.
It is so distinct
and adhesive.
It binds us together.
African Beat on the Voice of America. For more information, visit our website at www.voanews.com/AfricanBeat.
I'm Clara Frank, and here's what's trending. Mozambique could be on its way to becoming one of Africa's major coffee producers, thanks to a major increase of coffee production on Mount Gorongosa. Coffee giant Nespresso has taken an interest in the project, which is regenerating the area by providing an income for locals and restoring the rapidly eroding rainforest. Mozambique is not considered to be one of Africa's major coffee producers like Ethiopia and Kenya, but Mount Gorongosa's unique climate makes it very promising. Next up, evocative videos, graphic tapestries, charcoal drawings, woodcut prints, sculptures, and immersive sound installations are combining in the largest single show by South African artist William Kentridge. The exhibit at Cape Town's Zeitz Museum of Contemporary African Art explores themes including South Africa's history. Why should I hesitate? Putting drawings to work will run till March 23, 2020. And finally, a Syrian refugee's perilous tale of escaping his war-torn country has been transformed into a video game. Its creators, Hope Abdullah Karam's personal story, will challenge gamers to rethink their views on refugees. Starting from peaceful life before the war, it explores the family decision which led to his departure and his perilous journey from hometown Hama through Aleppo to the Turkish border. Path Out is currently available on video game distribution sites Stream and itch.io. And that's what's trending today.
Well, in East Africa, Kenya is hoping to boost its green energy output with the building of Africa's largest wind farm. The Lake Turkana wind farm is now fully operational and could help the country to reach 100% green energy by 2020. Kwame Amoah-Mensah of Reuters reports.
This is where wind meets power. Africa's largest wind power plant, Turkana in northern Kenya, is now fully operational and could help Kenyan consumers get a better deal on electricity tariffs. Rizwan Fasala is the executive director of Lake Turkana Wind Farm.
So during the day, we produce between 15 and 17% of Kenya's power. That is at peak demand. And at off-peak during the night, we produce up to 30% of Kenya's power.
Launched in June, the plant also aims to eradicate fossil fuel dependency and get the country to using 100% green energy by 2020. Nearly 70% of Kenyan's electricity already comes from renewable sources, including hydropower and geothermal. That is more than 3 times the global average. But not all Kenyans are on the grid. 1 in 4 still do not have access to electricity, and those who do battle frequent blackouts along with high costs. It's hoped the plant in Turkana will help change that, along with Kenya's transition to clean power.
Well, Kenya has made great strides in renewable energy in recent years and is considered to be one of the few African nations making progress towards clean power. Back here, U.S. President Donald Trump maintained Monday that China has reached out to resume trade negotiations, but China's foreign ministry spokesman could not confirm the report. Trump told reporters that China had called top U.S. trade representatives and said, "Let's go back to the table." He spoke during a meeting with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi on the sidelines of a meeting of G7 leaders in France.
We've gotten 2 calls, and very, very good calls, very productive calls. They mean business. They want to be able to make a deal. It's very important that, I think it's very important for them.
Reporters say China's foreign ministry spokesman Geng Shuang did not know about the phone calls Trump described, but said negotiations are the proper way to resolve the dispute.
我能告诉你的，还是说中美之间存在的经贸分歧，还是应该通过对话协商加以解决。但是美方进一步提高对中国输美产品关税的税率，严重违背两国元首的大阪会晤共识，损害中美两国利益，践踏多边贸易规则，威胁全球产业链、供应链的安全。
Back at the G7, Trump appeared before reporters later with India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi. When asked to elaborate more on the China's call for talks, the president insisted the calls came from the highest level. He said the trade dispute with China and the tariffs have been worth it.
I think it was necessary to go through this, you would say a rough patch, but I'd say maybe much more than a rough patch. But that's okay, because we've been paid billions and billions of dollars. And you know that prices haven't gone up, and there's been no inflation. And we've put a lot of money in the Treasury, and tens of billions of dollars.
Well, the U.S.-China tariff war is roiling world stock markets with wild gyrations in market performance, depending on the tariff announcements coming out of Washington and Beijing, and then regaining ground when some hopeful signs surface that the world's 2 biggest economies might yet reach a trade agreement in the coming months. Now, a former Republican congressman says he will launch a primary challenge to U.S. President Donald Trump in 2020. Joe Walsh is now the second candidate to unveil a challenge to President Trump from within his own party. Here's VOA's Elizabeth Shanoff.
My name is Joe Walsh. I'm a former Republican congressman. I'm a conservative. I'm running because Donald Trump is not who we are. In fact, he's the worst of who we are.
Conservative talk radio host Joe Walsh, once a supporter of Donald Trump, now says he'll challenge him for the Republican Party's 2020 presidential bid.
We've got a guy in the White House who's unfit, completely unfit, to be president. And it stuns me that nobody stepped up. Nobody in the Republican Party stepped up, because I'll tell you what, George, everybody believes in the Republican Party. Everybody believes that he's unfit.
Walsh is not the first Republican to challenge Trump, as former Massachusetts Governor Bill Weld announced a primary presidential bid back in April.
I'm going to take the next 30
Former South Carolina Governor Mark Stanford has also discussed exploring a run for the White House. Some political commentators are skeptical, pointing to the president's consistent support among voters within his party.
You need the support of the Republican Party, and Trump has that. And not only that, not only of the people across the country, the Republican Party is behind him, and that means state GOP chairmen, state parties, and these elections in presidential races are run state by state. When you have the state directors supporting president 100%, unfortunately, someone like Joe Walsh isn't going to get any traction.
These are urgent times.
Walsh, who served one term in the U.S. Congress, was a fierce critic of former President Barack Obama's, but voiced regret on Sunday for some of his controversial statements in the past.
I helped create Trump. There's no doubt about that. The personal, ugly politics, I regret that, and I'm sorry for that.
With a crowded field of Democrats on the left, Americans are already gathering first impressions of the candidates seeking their votes.
So attending these events, especially in Iowa, since we're the first in the nation, is important because that's where you figure out who you want to vote for, especially with such a crowded field as there is in 2020.
Elizabeth Chernoff, VOA News, Washington.
August 26th is Women's Equality Day in the United States. Each year, the day commemorates the adoption of the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which gave women the right to vote. The historic action was made possible by the women's suffrage movement and one of its leaders, Alice Paul. This year marks the 99th year of the adoption of the 19th Amendment. Well, growing up with albinism, 24-year-old Alan Herbert, a Kenyan journalism graduate, knew he was different. While he did not face the stigma and discrimination that other albinos in his country suffer, he did move to take precaution. He did need to take precaution. Despite this, he formed a football team made up of albino players as a way for people with his condition to fight for their space in Kenya. Sarah Kimani reports from Nairobi.
4-year-old Alan Herbert, the founder and team captain of the Black Albinism Football Club, Kenya's first football team made up entirely of African albinos. It's match day. In a country where people with albinism are still stigmatized, this is no ordinary team or match.
Football brings people of different diversities together, and when we decided a sport, we said football is the easiest, and actually it's also in the Kenyan curriculum, so people relate with football a little bit easier than any other sport.
Across East Africa, albinos have been targeted for murder by witch doctors who use their body parts in magic rituals. Isaac Mwaura is Kenya's first and only lawmaker with albinism.
People with albinism really suffer. They are black but not black enough, white but not white enough, disabled but not disabled enough. So we are caught in between it. And when we're caught in between it, we don't quite belong. So we have to self-define. These are self-definition activities.
The stigma has not stopped Herbert from dreaming and bringing together those who are like him. In their debut match, the 6-month-old team carries the day, winning 4-2 in a penalty shootout.
Once we fight the discrimination, once we beat off the stigmatization, then you can see the greatness that is in us. You have realized here how we've won. Yeah, we've won fair and square. The only thing that we have that our skin is a little bit pale and we have issues with our eyesight, but that does not make us less of people.
For now, it's time to revel in the first win. Sarah Kimani for VOA News, Nairobi.
Impressive. Well, and that's our show for today. Now be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, have a good evening.
Voices, we're talking about the news and issues you're talking about, sharing stories of development and growth across Africa, around the world, and in our lives. Topics that inform, empower, and change the rules. It's time for Our Voices with me, Haiti Adams Fitzpatrick,
and Hadiza Kiari,
and Ayan Bior,
and Orion Itangi Shaka.
It's time for Our Voices.